I've done my winning, 14 years of it, in my living room, rereading the other Stormlight books over and over and over again. But it is now time.
As he said, the time has come, and that time is 2025. Welcome to the first episode of the year of the 800s. I am your host, Alex, and you just heard from my oh-so-patient co-host, Adam. And as always, thank you to the man behind the screen making this all happen, Mr. Alan. Say hi, Alan.
If you joined us for our pre-show, you heard some music from Incompetech. Big thanks to them for their cool tunes that they released. That was Fearless First. You should look them up if you liked it and see what else they have to offer. Otherwise, if you want to know more about us, head over to dmstable.com, and there's a couple of links below the video. But otherwise, why don't we just jump right into things and get the ball rolling? What are we here to talk about tonight?
Tonight we will be discussing Book 5 of the Stormlight Archives, Wind and Truth, Brandon Sanderson's, what's secondary to magnum opus, penultimate opus, halfway through the Stormlight Archives, according to Brandon Sanderson himself, 14 years, over 6,000 pages. And I'm not going to summarize them all right here now, so let's get into it. Adam, let us know how this format works so we can start talking.
Yeah. We are a discussion show. What that means is we engage in discussion about Wind and Truth. At any point during the show, if you have something you want to talk about Wind and Truth, feel free to throw it up in the chat. And when we get a pause in the conversation, Alex or myself will peruse chat for any sort of topic or question that we want to discuss next. We'll pose it to chat as well as ourselves. And then Alex and I will weigh in on the topic to give you guys in chat a chance to type out what you think. And then we'll check out your responses and throw out any notable mentions that we find there. That's pretty much it. We just talk.
And as usual, a quick little disclaimer. This is a show that covers adult themes and topics, so bring kids around at your own discretion. Also, we are trying to create a fun, supportive, and judgment-free zone over at DM's Table. So, to be perfectly frank, be nice or fuck off.
All right, enough hesitation. Let's jump right into it. What were your initial thoughts of Wind and Truth?
Oh my god, 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 oh my god. Holy shit, this is long. So, obviously excited as Brandon Sanderson fans, and this is like, a climax of his works. Like, that is the equivalent to us of a, endgame, Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows type of book. So it was exciting in that respect, but my God, is the start slow on this one. I felt like I was climbing my way to Urithiru. That said, part of the reason why it felt like a slog was it was just dense. There was so much information to take in at the beginning, and it was interesting to get some new POVs. Absolutely, the Zeth ones were some of my favorites. And those ones, honestly, were the ones that kept me going in the beginning in particular, because it was a nice break away from the world is ending to these little past interludes in Shin and the life that Zeth lived. So how about you, Adam?
Yeah, the beginning day or two, as Wind and Truth is broken apart into days, I felt almost like Brandon Sanderson was sitting in front of a chessboard and was just setting up pieces for his grand move at the end to coup de grace the enemy, and it was a lot of setup. I personally thoroughly enjoy Brandon Sanderson just rambling about random shit. So for me, it was pretty enjoyable, but in terms of literature quality, I think there was something lacking from the start of this book that Brandon Sanderson just kind of missed on in terms of, hooking the reader and wanting them to continue the story. Is that necessary for a book 5 in a series? Maybe not. But in general, for a novel, I think the hook part was missing a little bit from this book.
I would agree to an extent. I think, at least for my part of the lack of hook is a lack of, despite the fact that it was a 10-day countdown, it felt like there was a bit of a lack of urgency in the pacing of the story itself. I know that there was a lot of overlap because there were a lot more of our main characters that get their own chapters in essentially the same environments, and we were just getting multiple views of stuff. But there were times where it felt a little repetitive, and not in a way that was revealing anything significant enough for it to be repetitive. Because if you're going to do something repetitive like that, the payoff has to be there, and I didn't feel like there really was for me in the beginning of the book. So like I'm just talking the beginning, and I'm being a bit nitpicky here because I enjoy lore dumping and world building as much as the next guy. It's just, it felt like when he set the 10 days, there were some days in there that were awesome and some that felt a little bit like you could have hand waved most of it and I would have gotten the gist.
Yeah.
So it really depended on some of them. And yeah, day one's most memorable thing is everybody getting sent off to do everything. And day 2 really didn't have a ton other than the Zeth flashbacks for me. You get a little bit from some characters that we don't usually hear from, but yeah, it just felt like there could have been some editing done on this, and I'm glad they didn't spend a ton more time editing because it's been so long anyway. But but it felt like there was a bit of a shift in the tone and pacing at the beginning in a way that, like, other books, I'm going to go back to like my personal favorites, which are like Oathbreaker and Rhythm of War, where the hook at the beginning is you kind of have to hit the ground running with the book, whereas this one, it's like you're starting at the foot of a mountain. And yeah, it's fun for a little while, but eventually you just got to catch your breath.
Yeah. I hyped this book up a ton in my head. Brandon Sanderson's finales for his books are something that everybody talks about. The Sanderlanche.
Yeah.
And I was expecting this book to just be one huge Sanderlanche. So I'm trying to take a cut back from that and understand that maybe I hyped it a little bit too much and should have had realistic expectations here for it's still a book, right?
Yeah, but I don't think it's unreasonable for a book 5. Now, granted, we have to take this with the grain of salt that we knew going into it. It's book 5 of supposedly 10. So the full downhill Sanderlanche I was never expecting, but this is like a climactic point that was mentioned by Sanderson, and I don't think it's unreasonable to have the expectation to be at least half and half, or maybe even mostly the Sanderlanche portion, because of how much setup we thought was being done in the first 4 books. So yeah, going into it, having a certain mentality probably doesn't, or certain expectations doesn't help. However, I think that there was something a little lacking as far as the pacing. V.S. Drake says that they thought the pacing sort of matched Kaladin's new mindset. I didn't mind the pacing when we were with Kaladin and Zeth. I didn't. I actually had more of an issue when we were with Shallan, Dalnar, Navani. Uh, I think the only other exception really was I really liked the pacing for a lot of Adolin's viewpoints.
Well, let's make that a topic. What viewpoints did you like, and did you think the fact that there was 100,000 different viewpoints, do you think that helped the story or took away from the story?
I think I could find something that I liked in all of them. I found myself really liking Zeth and Kaladin in particular because, well, my interest in psychology kind of puts me into there a little bit, and I think that the work that Sanderson clearly did in taking real-world psychological principles that we experience in the and integrating those in the book in a way that actually has real depth and nuance to it. I thought that was extremely well done. The pacing suited the tone pretty well. When it needed to be actiony, it was, and Zeth was usually the one driving that. But when it needed to be introspective, it was, and that was a lot of Kaladin, and there was just enough of Syl in there to brighten things up. So I really liked how that character trifecta in particular worked together. Adolin's as well we got to see depth in a character that I've always liked, but always felt was kind of, he was the Prince Charming character and who was always good at what he was. He just kind of got a little bit left behind, but we get to see through his eyes how much more he has to offer to the story in general, in particular with his interactions with the king or emperor of, why am I blanking on the country that he was?
Was it Azir?
Yeah, Azir, the emperor of Azir.
Gox.
But I don't think there were a lot more viewpoints, and I think that was a really good thing because we get to see more of the world through more different lenses. However, I don't think it was handled the best in this one. I read it via the audiobook, and the shift in viewpoints could be very confusing sometimes. In particular, when you'd shift from one person to the other, there isn't as much of a cut in it from an audio perspective. I don't know if that was better done in the book itself, like if you're physically reading it. But even if it wasn't, it was still hard to tell whether you were in the past or present until you were partially into reading a given section. And it would have been really helpful to have something a little more delineating between the different viewpoints, because it just felt a little confusing sometimes in a way that I had to keep going back over certain parts to make sure that I got what I thought I did out of it, and I wasn't blending certain things together. That said, it was cool to see from a bunch more viewpoints. What about you, Adam? Your thoughts on?
Yeah, so in true don't spoiler me fashion, kind of refrained from finding out as much as I could about the book ahead of time. I obviously found some things out because it's impossible to watch Sanderson's weekly video releases and not accidentally find out stuff about it. But going into Wind and Truth, Zeth was probably my favorite character. And boy, was I excited when he got his first perspective. And I was just like, yay, it's a Zeth's perspective. And then he got a backstory, and I was like, oh my God, Zeth's the backstory character. And I was super stoked about that. But barring the fact that that made me happy before reading Wind and Truth. After reading Wind and Truth, I've got to agree about Adolin. V.S. Drake said it the best. He was the GOAT of this story.
Mm-hmm.
I absolutely loved his I'm not going to be put into your mold perspective that he held. And it was a fantastic thing to see from a story that was essentially people sorting themselves into molds for the entirety of the books. And Adolin, with his whole like, a promise is bigger than an oath because a promise never stops. Like, if you break a promise, you can keep going. While I don't necessarily agree exactly with what he was saying, I 100% agree with the theory behind what he was saying,
Mm-hmm.
which is, when you make a promise that is related to helping somebody, you don't just stop trying because you failed to help them. You try harder. You try in a different direction. You keep trying, and that's something that Adolin really nailed with his perspectives, especially with teaching Gawks how to become the leader that he was never meant to be. And side note, I really think Gawks is going to be a huge character in Era 2 Stormlight. And I'm really excited to see him return in Stormlight 6.
I would agree that I would love Gawks to be a huge character. Whether or not he is, I think is going to depend on what if any kind of time skip we're looking at in the second half. It's a little hard to know because some of our favorite characters have either died or become immortal. So it is a bit tough to tell who's going to be around and who's not, but I think that one of the things that I was okay with this book that made this okay that this book was so long was I felt like every character that I really cared about in this book got a good wrap up in it, and that's a tough thing to do when you have so many viewpoints. It's just you don't always have to meander as much as he did in getting to those points, and that's, and when you don't have that clear delineation, it's a little bit wonky in my opinion, but still. That said, are there any viewpoints that you feel didn't live up to what you would have hoped for them?
Yeah, I gotta say, Yasna just kind of got blindsided and then was done. She got benched hard. And, she was the OG of Surge Binders. She kicked off Shallan's story. She started Surge Binding way back when Gavilar was alive. And she made so many cool waves in Rhythm of War, and then she had one argument in Wind and Truth, lost it, and then that was it.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought her up because that was one of the two that I had in mind as well, because it seems like Yasna was always meant to be kind of like a catalyst, like she was a foil to other characters or a catalyst for other characters. And I thought when she came back into Oathbreaker that we were going to get a lot more out of her, and really all we got is she's bringing democracy to Roshar. And that was her thing at the end, and it just felt so shoved in there. Meanwhile, her her treaty with the listeners is what saved the Shattered Plains, or at least semi-saved them. We'll see how time unfolds. Hopefully, the listeners are will keep to their oaths in that one, and the humans too, for that matter. But yeah, she kind of just felt like in this book a means of showing just how terrible Teravangian or Teravodium was. Exactly like what V.S. Drake said, is that Teravangian fully became the bastard that we knew he could be. And to really show how big of a difference that was, they had to have a smart character go 1v1 him and show just like, it doesn't matter if you're the smartest person, you are dealing with like a cosmic level being. That felt like her purpose in this book, which kind of, I think, undercuts her as a character a little bit, which sucks because like I liked her as a character and it would have been cool to see a bit more from her. I will say this, I'm really glad that her and
Wit?
her and Wit broke up. Because like that barely made any sense to me in the first place. And
Yeah. We knew, well, I guess if you've read any of the Secret Projects, you know that Wit leaves, but so that was an inevitable break off. But
yeah, it's just the being together in the first place bit, and I was like, okay, I don't need that. Like, there's plenty of other potential romances in there. Like, honestly, one of the best things about Shallan is her marriage to Adolin. So
yeah,
and like how it shows how you can have like a healthy love between people who are still working on themselves. Which was a cool display. But for Yasna, I think V.S. Drake makes a good point when they say that what was done to her did undercut her, but for a purpose, so they don't think the character was abused. What do you think about that note?
Yeah, I agree. You know, Yasna, it's not necessarily that Sanderson didn't do her justice in my mind. It's that I wanted more Yasna in the story than what we got.
Yeah, and that's what I mean by didn't do her justice. Is I just had always, maybe it's because I liked her as a character, but I felt like you said, there could have been more from her, and I think we've well established that there's plenty of space in the book where it could have been like maybe a little less here and a little more there.
Yeah, I do agree though about Yasna is probably going to have some screen time in future books. She definitely has some character growth potential that could definitely be explored in this interim time between now and book 6.
Big screen time.
Big screen time.
So the other character that I had a bit of a mixed view on how their story was handled was Lift. One of the things that I thought was really cool was that we did get a viewpoint from her. And yeah, she can be a little abrasive as a character. Like, it's hit and miss with her for me. But I liked when we got a little bit of it. It was a little bit of comic relief from her. But one of the things that made her the most interesting to me in this book was we were finally hearing more from the gods, and we finally see cultivation start to make moves.
Yeah.
And I thought there was going to be a lot heavier of a tie-in between Lift and cultivation. And really didn't get much of that at all, and that felt like a little bit of a letdown. So I'm hoping there will be more in the future, but it seems unlikely given the fact that cultivation has left the goddamn planet.
but I think Lift's powers could potentially still work, making her the only human surge binder left.
Possibly. Again, it's going to be hard to tell, and maybe that's what she's there for the next book, is to explore what remains when of the magic that had nothing to do, or the investiture that had nothing to do with odium, honor, or retribution.
Yeah. What did you this I don't know if this needs to be a topic per se, but retribution. What do you think of that title change?
Honestly, I kind of love what they did with it. I don't fully love how it was handled in that, like, Dalinar is arguably the main character across these 5 books, as he is the focal point of honor in the modern portion of the story. And I love him as a character overall. He's a flawed person who is trying to be better. He has a lot that he's really good at, but he has to learn. Like, the character growth that he goes throughout these 5 books is stellar, almost literally by the end.
Interstellar.
But the fact that he was smart enough to find a different path, like, I had kind of in my head as I was reading this, I'm like, how does a mortal deal with a god that has access to essentially quantum vision, the ability to see possibilities,
mm-hmm.
and not only see them but process them? And I was like, well, you can become a god, but then when we learn what we do about honor, which honestly, for the lore perspective, love that bit. Is how much we get about honor, which I think can be its own separate topic. But I love the idea of creating something that has to draw cosmic attention, because if you can't be the one to beat them, what are the things that can? And finding a means of doing that, I really love that as the, like, focal point of the Sanderlanche, and creating a god that we know that there's only one more like it out there, and creating a god that is this combination of 2. Retribution makes sense. Like, for a combination of honor and odium, it is a means of, it is that combination of both oath and disgust that those make up,
Just justified revenge, essentially.
Well, it's an oath of revenge, really, And, like, retribution feels like it fits, and was, I think, a cool way of.
The big problem I had with retribution is it makes too much sense. No, I mean, like, at the beginning of the book and at the end of Rhythm of War, Wit's all like, oh, we gotta trap odium, and all the Rosharans just go, okay. But, like, why the fuck would they agree to it? Like, oh, they're facing up against a god. They don't have a god on their own side. What can challenge a god? Other gods. Like, yeah, it makes sense to let odium off the planet to make the other gods fuck him up,
To an extent, Like when Retribution was made, and correct me if I misinterpreted this, he's still bound to
No, he is
Roshar.
not. He is unbound.
Oh, I thought he was still bound, but now the eyes were still on him. Okay,
That's the
well,
whole point of what Dalinar did is he broke every oath that Honor made and that he made.
oh, okay, yeah, the unbound thing. I don't know why I attributed that to honor and not to retribution. That's my misinterpretation of it, and maybe what I get for trying to finish up this book when I had COVID. I didn't know I
Yeah,
had it
that's
at the
like
time, but I did.
that was one question that slipped my mind as a possibility because I just kind of accepted that it was a thing that Sanderson was okay with to keep a storyline going for the overall Cosmere that Odium can't leave. But I was like, no, it's not that selfish for Rasharan to be like, get him the fuck off my planet.
Well, and that's kind of it, right? Is they Roshar had essentially been a pawn might be the wrong word for an entire planet, but it was a piece on the board for this Cosmere wide chess game that gods and immortals were using to create a stalemate to the detriment of the people of Roshar. And yeah, the only way to potentially end that was to break the stalemate in such a way that didn't give Odium exactly what Odium the power or the shared with Teravantian
Yeah.
Avatar what they wanted, which was basically to have the element of surprise and or time as well as the power that they had. And instead they have more power, but they have neither the time nor the element of surprise, which takes it down to 1 out of 3 instead of 3 out of 3.
Yeah.
Which quite honestly, considering where we saw the gap between mortals and immortals being, getting 2 out of 3 ain't bad. Especially when that first one getting that extra power means that might mean that being withdraws from the planet, which we'll find out. But I think it was built to be the only move, and that is that chessboard thing that you kind of got in your first impressions from Brandon Sanderson was the haha, there was only ever going to be one option.
I will say I did thoroughly enjoy the moment when Teravangian was like, okay, I'm a hypocrite. Yoink, my power now. Let's talk about V.S. Drake's comment here, though.
All right.
He said, V.S. Drake says, can we take just a quick couple minutes to talk about how fucking heavy this book was? Big focus on mental health, and I was here for it after it hit its stride.
Well, I would have to agree, V.S. Drake. The focus on mental health stuff is where I think the most powerful moments of this book really come from. Some of it, in as far as the dialogue goes, was a bit cheesy, and I felt like could have been maybe handled with a little more eloquence, or I didn't particularly like the prose of it, how that was done. Ham-fisted is a good way to put it. However, the concepts behind it and the messaging behind it was incredibly well done for whether it is the depression that it's a little preachy when we get to the depression parts with Kaladin of the like, oh yeah, you just kind of have to choose to do these things until they work. And it doesn't always quite work that way in real life, but there is a certain power to the choice of not submitting to the darkness, is making that choice to do what you can. And I thought that was powerful, as well as how it was handled with Zeth. That moment where love the soldier thoughts line. Yeah. The Zeth stuff I thought was incredible as well, as far as like dealing with PTSD and a child that was essentially brainwashed into becoming a killer his entire life when he had a choice, and helping people realize that they have choices. And also, not to toot my own horn, but called it with Shallan and Formless not being what we thought it was, at least at the end. Because
that was, I mean, Formless is what we thought it was. It just
not entirely. You said it was just her without her. With all of her memories, and it was that, but also when she was seeing it afterwards, it wasn't that she had just figured out what it was, but she had kind of blocked it off again. It's like, I know what you are, but I'm not going to engage with you. She engages with it and finds out that what she's been engaging with was not what she thought, at least not in the spiritual realm. I thought that was interesting, that it was something that she realized that she had to accept about herself, rather than just understanding. There was an acceptance component to it. And when it comes to mental health, accepting what you're dealing with is a big part. And I liked how that was handled with that portion of it. And I could point to 100 other ones, but man, that felt like Brandon Sanderson did a ton of work to make the mental health aspects, make sure that they were dealt with well. And there were some really cool moments that came out of it. And yes, very heavy ones too. May or may not have shed a few tears in there.
Yeah, I think when we talk about mental health, we obviously have to acknowledge Kaladin's journey in this book too, where, you know, he became Roshar's first therapist. And I really liked, yeah, I did call the Shallan's mom as a herald, and it's all Shallan's fault. And Shallan even said it was all her fault. Anyway, I really liked the journey that Kaladin went on with figuring out different methods to help people, and that it wasn't just cookie cutter, get everybody to fit the same mold. And I really liked the moment when Kaladin was like, Zeth is me. And then Zeth was like, no, I'm not. Like, we're completely different people. And Kaladin was like, no, you are. And Zeth was like, yeah, whatever, dumbass. And then later Kaladin was like, oh, he's not me.
He's my brother.
He's my brother.
Yeah, those are really good points, though, is that he learns that not everybody's path to healing is the same, because everybody's circumstances are different. And the route to empathy is not necessarily moving through our own perspective or even necessarily the other person's. It's just finding a way to connect with people and finding out what at the core is what moves them, like how Kaladin, like you said, is that focal point for it, and how he deals with the heralds. In particular, love how they deal with Nail.
Yeah.
And, you know, how do you deal with somebody who believes, who's a zealot, really, and how do you deprogram somebody who has built this belief at their core? And he had to realize, oh, I can't logic him out of this. I have to go through the emotional side of it.
Yeah.
You know?
And I really liked that Kaladin tried the exact same thing with Ishar, and Ishar was like, "Get fucked, mate." Sorry, I'm swearing so much tonight. I don't know what's
That's all
wrong with me.
good.
Ishar was like, "Go away, man." And Kaladin was like, "Oh yeah, right, yeah. You got to figure out different things for different people again."
Well, and that's the way it goes in life, though, isn't it? Like, we like to treat these things that are like, oh, I had this epiphany, and then everything from here on out is smooth sailing. No, it's a constant learning process, and that's always what it's going to be. Although I will be interested to see after a couple, centuries or whatever, being a herald, how his therapy it holds up. Like, although it probably helps the fact that they are no longer being tortured for those centuries when they're
Yeah.
all.
But the whole time moves slower thing, like, ooh, aren't they old enough? Like,
At times an illusion.
all right.
Yeah,
I hate to say it, but we are getting kind of late in the night.
yeah, we could.
Cut this short tonight. So
Yeah, we could talk about this for days. Yeah, it all
means
means
nothing when you're a demigod struggling with keeping your mind intact.
But at least they have a therapist, which is more than I can say for a lot of people. So
they need Wit to pop in there and be like, "Hey, have you heard of copper mines?"
Oh boy, that will be interesting to see how Roshar, now that it's on the cosmic stage, will hold up. And I want to see mash in like the intermixing of different magic systems, and if and how that can happen, because they did imply that there is more freedom of movement for the Spren now that Honor and Odium no longer exist individually.
Yeah. Quick beside here. Tom was a beast, Fiastrake
Yes.
says. Totally agree.
Tone
And
appreciation post.
I think Sanderson did an awesome thing with that moment where he did Talonel's fight off screen and people just saw the aftermath, because he is something out of legend. Like, we don't get to see what he does. It's legendary. And it's just I thought it was kind of a good move on Sanderson's part to be like, look at what happened. It was all this guy.
Yeah, and the whole, it's probably the biggest note that I have for this entire book is it could have used more show or not show and less tell.
Yeah.
And Tone's scene is the perfect example of what we know Sanderson can do in showing and not telling. And there could have been a little bit more of that, but love that bit. Absolutely. Perfectly handled.
Yeah.
So why don't we do final thoughts real quick, and then we're going to start winding down.
Sure thing. Shall I go first?
Yes.
Can I go first? Yeah.
Right ahead.
Okay. I really liked this book. I know, shocker. But it didn't live up to the hype I had in my head. The Sanderlanche was different because all the stories crescendoed at their own pace and at their own time. But damn, was it a really cool way to portray those 10 days. Like, Taravangian's loophole thing, I really liked it. I really liked the whole, I'm just going to take all the capitals and you can all get fucked. Didn't really care too much for the final fight between Dalinar and Gav. That part was like, like, it doesn't seem like the smartest move to give Dalinar a choice like that when he could have just put him up against an unstoppable force anyway in one. Obviously it kind of panned out for him, but kind of risky. I I knew death was coming. I was surprised we lost Dalinar. I was surprised everybody thinks Kaladin is dead. Seth lost a limb. That's kind of a bummer. But everybody else kind of made it out okay-ish. Sigzil, if you read The Sunlit Man, you knew what was going to happen to him. So that wasn't too much of a surprise. But overall, I think Sanderson did a really good job of setting the stage for what Era 2 is going to look like, and giving the Cosmere a nudge, where he essentially said, "Hey, shit's going to start heating up universe-wide now." And that's something I am all about, and I am here for that. So overall, I'd say 4 out of 5 stars for me. Would recommend. Not as great praise for the other 4 books. This is probably my least favorite of the 5, but still great job, Sanderson. Big long series like this are hard to wrap, and I think you did good.
Can't say I disagree with much, if anything, of what you said, but my own take on it is this is a book where there was a good idea for how to create. There's a good idea for structure. There was a good idea for an end game, or there was a good idea for themes. There was a little bit of an issue of execution as far as pacing and some of the dialogue went. But when it comes to lore, the world building, the Cosmere building, and a lot of the characters, with my couple examples of Lift and Yasna and maybe and Venli, I think is the other one. I think that didn't fully flesh out the way that I would have hoped. Most of it, but like those are 3 out of like 15 characters that got their day in the sun. So 12 out of 15 ain't bad. There was just so much in this, and it was one of those things where, if I'm going to continue this mountain metaphor, hiking to the top of the mountain was a slog to get there, but damn, was the view beautiful when you did. Because now we get this glimpse at the sky, we get a glimpse at the Cosmere and what's to come, and I'm excited for that. Really loved how the mental health aspects were handled. There are some really poignant moments in this one. Honestly, this had the most emotionality of any of the books. I think it would have hit harder had the pacing been better, but I would put this around the middle for me of all the books. I would say it's above Words of Radiance. It's still below Way of Kings, and I really liked Rhythm of War. And I'd say it's similar to Oathbringer. They each have their pluses and minuses for me, but definitely, if you are invested in the Stormlight archives, there's no reason to stop now whatsoever, because I don't think you'll, if you go into it with an open mind, realizing that this is going to be a bit different from the others, it doesn't follow quite the same patterns, and you keep an open mind, there's some great stuff in this one that makes it well worth the 1,300 pages or 59 hours of listening. So,
yeah. VS Drake says he thinks it'll be a lot of people's least favorite of all 10 of the Stormlight books that will eventually exist. He loved the lore completions. Can't wait for more Adolin. Definitely agree with that. Adolin really, really moved up in the ranks for fave character in this book. Kaladin's ending and how the ending handled makes the first 2 books so much more bearable. I don't know what you mean by that, man. I love the first 2 books.
Well, I think I kind of get what you mean as far as we get the character growth that we wanted him to have, and we deal with a lot of his suffering in the first two books, and to have him have peace of some kind at the end, even if it's only like partially so. Yeah, it's a tough thing for sure, Via Straight, to deal with the depression stuff, but it is a pretty accurate account of what it's like. Not everybody gets to the place that Kaladin does. Kaladin had a lot of great things fall into place that not everybody does. That said, the fact that he got it couldn't be a more deserving character.
Yeah. I will say for Kaladin, I had high hopes of some sort of alternate old magic coming into play.
Yeah.
And he just became a herald.
Yeah, I had really hoped for something like that as well, especially when we learned about wind and night and rock being spirits that somehow exist out in between Spren and the investitures. I thought we were going to get more of that. Hopefully that comes later. But for now, we need to wrap up. So why don't you go ahead and run our plugs real quick, and then we'll very briefly talk what's coming up and wrap up the episode.
Yeah, let's do next book first, and then we'll do plugs.
All right.
We will be back on the air on March 1st with The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. I hope I said that right.
And coming up after that, I know that we're starting this in March, but we will double up at the end of the month. So March is going to be the slow march of history. That's right. We are doing historical fiction. So if you have any suggestions, let us know on our socials, which Adam will tell you what they are.
Yeah. So we have two primary ways of communications. That is is it Twitter? No, it's X. Is Twitter X?
Yeah, I think so.
I just had a huge brain fart. Yeah, X. We're at DM. Sorry about that. We're at DM's Table on X, and we're at the DM's Table on Facebook. Reach out to us if you want to hear more about what we do, or if you want to just drop your book rec on our page. That's totally cool. We also have a Discord server that we love to chit chat on about various things. We did an experimental text-only conversation about the previous 4 Stormlight Archive books last time, and that went okay. We might try and do some stuff like that more in the future. So if that's something that's right up your alley, hit us up on our socials and we'll get you that Discord link. Otherwise, head to dmstable.com for all the info you could ever hope for about what we do and who we are about. We primarily pay for this show 2 ways. That's Patreon and Etsy. We're the DM's Table on Patreon. The link is below your video. And Etsy, go to dmstable.com/Etsy to see our Etsy page. There you get a whole bunch of 3D printed nerd culture stuff, as well as some electronic artwork and other nerdy things. So check those out. A couple other things. We have a YouTube channel. We are The DM's Table on YouTube. We post all of our videos there, including these book reviews. Maybe you're watching us there right now. I don't know. That's future Adam talk. But you should check it out if you like what you saw tonight. And I think that's pretty much all I've got for plugs.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us at the beginning of this newest year, 2025. We hope you have a great year and that your 2024 ended in peace, harmony, love, and all sorts of other great things, and no small amount of reading. With that said, we'll see you next book.
Yeah, thanks.